Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the latest. Let's put it this way. It's supposedly billed as Amazon's classical, biggest hot-selling release. And here it is. Boom! Yes, it's Barbie and Ken play Sibelius and Prokofiev. Actually, that's probably not fair to Janine Jansen, who's a very good violinist. And, but it's just impossible to resist the comparison. Anyway, that out of the way, let's be serious, shall we? Deadly serious. This is a good disc. It really is. I don't look forward, as some of you seem to think, to trashing anything. I always hope everything that comes out is marvelous. And if it is, I'm happy to say so. And if it isn't, well, I have to say so. This is an interesting coupling. I suspect that the Prokofiev first is the piece that they really sunk their fangs into because it's the better performance. It really is. The Sibelius is there because, Mäkelä, he's Finnish, supposed to be good at Sibelius. He's not, but that's another issue. And also because it's the more popular of the two works. And you really very rarely hear Prokofiev's first violin concerto anymore, unless someone's doing both of them on one disc. The second is vastly more popular. It's a more romantic and melodic piece. The first is kind of experimental and in many ways more interesting than the second, but it doesn't get played very often. It's quite short, only about 20 minutes long, and very difficult, and it ends quietly, and it does all the things that, with like a slowish movement, it does all the things that concertos aren't supposed to do. And as a result of that, it tends to get neglected. So I have nothing but props for Janine Jansen for electing to do the Prokofiev first, and Mäkelä accompanies her very well. It's with the Oslo Philharmonic. They all know what they're doing. I mean, it's a lovely performance. The central scherzo type thing, the fast movement, which is incredibly virtuosic and interesting. It's in Prokofiev's early sort of harder-edged, glittery style, sort of like The Gambler or The Fiery Angel or one of those things. And it's brilliant and somewhat sardonic and very, very interesting music. I haven't heard it in a while. And listening to it again, I was quite struck by just how brilliant and interesting it really is. And the finale, it's a moderato, is perfect for what the work is. And I wish it were played more often, and I wish it were recorded more frequently. And I'm really happy to see these two young artists go at it and go at it successfully. So yay! I'm really happy. That's marvelous. So for that, the piece, the album is really worth hearing for me. Now, the Sibelius is more of a mixed bag. I found the first movement to be the most disappointing. After that, things go pretty well. Jansen needs to have, I would say, just more intensity and a beefier tone. The first movement of the Sibelius, remember after the first big orchestral climax, instead of a development section, there's this big solo cadenza. And it begins with this scream on the violin. It's like, wah! Other violinists, it's a good indication of where the performance is going to go in terms of its emotional temperature. And Jansen is kind of sweet. There's so much more grit and darkness in the music than Jansen brings out in the gutsier moments, and it's the same thing with Mäkelä. These huge orchestral climaxes, they could be just volcanic because the orchestra doesn't get a lot of opportunities to erupt in this movement. It really doesn't. I mean, Sibelius is very, very smart. The sonorities are largely dark and like nothing rises above middle C. So you hear the violin part, but there's that wonderful, wonderful climax between the first and second subjects in the recapitulation when it's going, ya-da-da, ya-da-da. There's this huge climax and the orchestra goes, yum, bum, and the brass come in, ba, ba, boom, with a timpani underneath it. Wow. You can really make something of it. Mäkelä doesn't. I mean, it's just sort of soft-edged and smushy. And so for that reason, I found the first movement somewhat underwhelming because the climaxes don't climax and because I think Jansen needs to have just a little bit more substance in her tone and needs to play it harder than she does. But she plays very well. I mean, she's a marvelous violinist. The slow movement is lovely. It's unkillable. It's always beautiful. This is a somewhat measured performance of it, and it just goes perfectly well. And I like the finale. The finale isn't so quick, but it's nicely rhythmic. I mean, Mäkelä sets a really good pace at the beginning. And here Jansen really does dig in the way she should. That second subject, with the stopped horns, you hear the stopped horns. The accompaniments are nicely balanced against the violin. It's very exciting toward the end. It's lovely from there on. So on the whole, this is a decent record. It hasn't been released physically yet in the U.S. It's slated for a July release sometime, but I downloaded it right away and played it a few times so I could get a sense of what's coming. And I'm happy to say that what's coming is worth hearing. I mean, that's really nice. It always pleases me when people do things well. I mean, I'm not rooting for anybody to fail. And so, it's we can make fun and poke a little bit of, I mean, if you look at Jansen's web page, there's this thing about how she's golden toned, golden, ethereal, something. Well, she is those things. And it's interesting because, you don't want to be golden and ethereal in the first movement of the Sibelius. You want to be gritty and anguished, but, it's okay. It's okay. It's a good disc. On the whole, it's really a good disc. And for the Prokofiev, it's absolutely worth hearing because it's a marvelous piece that doesn't get enough attention. So there you have it, my friends. Keep on listening, and thanks for joining me. Take care.